We are very civilized. But the one thing when it comes to food, it turns us into these kind of like if eating and planning to eat what to eat next is an Olympic sport. Malaysians will always take gold. And I think there is this saying is very, very true when it comes to like, kind of kopitiam and going to get a chair or get something. You snooze, you lose. It's like you're eating and you're finishing, and then suddenly you have like a group of people just crossing, waiting, like looking at you like, are you done yet?
Maybe, don't you think so? Like all this like competitiveness in food has helped you in MasterChef.
Why, hello there, food lovers, and welcome to The Hungry Immigrant, the place where flavors cross borders and cultures unite. I'm your host, Abang Brian, coming to you with stories, secrets, and the irresistible charm of Asian cuisine and heritage. Each week, we'll journey into the heart of what makes food more than just a meal. We'll talk to chefs, celebrities, home cooks, and food enthusiasts who have brought their heritage to our tables. From the bustling streets of Kuala Lumpur to the vibrant markets of Manila and Seoul to the Chinatowns of New York, Paris, and Toronto, we're exploring the magic of food that connects us all. So join us as we delve into the rich tapestry of Asian food culture and heritage, celebrating the traditions and innovations that make our culinary world so diverse and exciting. Now, get ready as today's episode promises to be a flavorful journey.
Okay, so on this episode of Hungry Immigrant, it's a little bit different this time because I have arrived in London. And I'm supposed to interview someone who does not live in central London itself. So I thought that she was based in central London, but she's not. I don't know her personally. So I did as I always do. I randomly texted people on Instagram and told them that like, hey, you know what? This is what we do at the Hungry Immigrant. And, we want to preserve Asian food culture and heritage. And, I think you're a good person to talk to. And so this person's profile on her Instagram is that she is the winner of MasterChef UK. One of the years, I can't remember which year. But so we've been texting back and forth. We've not had a Zoom call. We have exchanged messages on WhatsApp. And I think because she's a busy mom and she works as well, so her messages are kind of like delayed. And when I arrived here, I think we had some sort of misunderstanding on the timing. And, we thought that it would be like 30 minutes train ride to Surrey, which she told me it was like Surrey, right? How would I know what Surrey is, right? I don't live here. And we just came from Paris. And I'm like, adjusting to this whole speaking English thing again. And so I was like, okay, so is this like for real? Is this going to happen? And when we actually took this Uber, it says that it's like an hour and a half away from where we stay in central London. So I'm kind of worried. I don't doubt that she's a real person. I hope she's a real person. But like, it's kind of, if it was in central London and like, the person doesn't show up, it's fine because we stay in central London, right? But to travel an hour away and the address that she gave, this is not against anyone in the UK, but like it doesn't have numbers. So like someone told me like in the outskirts of London, outside of London, sometimes the buildings or the estate that they stay in don't have a number. So I'm like, oh, okay, where are we going? So this is an adventure, and I think this is the first time we're doing the Hungry Immigrant in this format. But I thought that would be very interesting to bring all of y'all listening on the journey of really meeting this person and talking to this person. So yeah, we're in the Uber and we have 1 hour to go. So I'm just going to do some of my PhD work and just pray. Hi, Ping. I just want to make sure that I'm in the right place.
Overview.
It's like overlooking like
Like a valley. Yeah, it said 2 cars.
Okay, so I made it. I arrived at a place where I was like, wait, is this a joke? Or like, this is literally the Uber driver said to me, this is like a horror film. like waiting to happen because you have never met this person. I was like, no, I've never met this person. And like we've been WhatsApping, and even our WhatsApp, I think because both of us were always in different time zones.
Yes.
It was a bit delayed. And I was like, okay, is this person for real? And then she's like, and I describe to people what I've seen now. It's planes, they're horses. It's a very nice view, but literally it reminds me of that film where I don't know, they invite people and then they ask them to run in the fields and they're like shot down. And I was like, okay.
You're kind of describing my fantasy though.
But yeah.
Let's do that. Let's get my father-in-law's air rifle out and later just run down the field.
But yeah, so like immediately I felt the warmth of Ping, and she welcomed us, and I was like, oh my God, this Ipoh Mali girl or this girl from Ipoh is like herself, and we felt so comfortable with each other and we connected immediately. So thank you very much, Ping Coombes, for welcoming us to your home. We'll not tell you where it is, but like it's outside central London and it's beautiful. But like, yeah, thank you for taking that leap of faith and
I think it's both the same with both of us, right? So my husband's like, who is this person? I was like, I'm not sure. But I don't know why I say yes. It just felt good to say yes. And I didn't feel like, that I should say no. But why this guy is flying all over here, is coming to me. So I've got nothing to lose, right? If anything, like I'll just kick him up and shoot him with an air rifle.
Exactly what I was thinking, because it's like an hour away from central London where we're staying for our event, which we're here for. And I was like, oh, wait, if she, and the address that she gave me didn't have a unit number. I was like, if she makes me go all the way there and just like, haha, I was so mad. I was like, you know what, I'm going to record this episode. I'm going to air it. I'm like, this person, like, you totally pranked me and you'll be, but yeah. So here we are, and I'm so grateful to you for welcoming us to your home. But like, for people who don't know Ping Coombes was the 2014 MasterChef winner, if not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then Champion of Champions in 2020.
22,
22, yeah, 22. Besides those two titles that you have won, right? Or even the story behind the two titles, I think we are targeting a global audience who may not even know. For example, I always introduce myself, my story and all. So who is Ping Coombes?
Well, so I actually am nobody to start with. Well, I still think that I'm nobody in like the whole world, I'm kind of like doing this minute little thing, it's like a rice grain in like kind of like a, a rice field.
Yeah.
But I first moved here in 2000. I met my husband in Malaysia, in Ipoh actually. I've always wanted to go to university. So it's always been like in the plan. So once I plan something, I try to see it through. That's kind of like my personality. But I've always wanted to go to university. And at that point, there isn't very much in Malaysia that I could do that I feel like really kind of what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But fate had it that I met Andrew, my husband, and I decided, right, we're going to come here or else our relationship won't work. We had 3 years of long distance relationship, but I had an unconditional offer to study in Oxford. So I then gathered my stuff and moved here. So I had no connections. I had no family here. I only had Andrew. Like very much it's a leap of faith. And people have been asking my mom, what if she goes there and then she gets sold off? Or, Chinese aunties, they're like, what if they go there and she gets sold off or they get, human trafficking? How do they know this guy is genuine, I don't. The thing is, I don't. I have to take a leap of faith, and I did. And Andrew's parents welcomed me into their home, taught, like in the time that I was here, I was able to learn the culture, and I fully immersed myself into British culture, food and scene and humor, and I loved it.
Which is not easy. British humor is a little bit different.
It's not easy.
But yeah, big shout out to Andrew and mother-in-law and father-in-law and everybody.
I felt really lucky
for welcoming this Malaysian girl into a wonderful place. Like
exactly. I mean, I felt really lucky because I found someone like that, and the family that comes with it that actually embraced me. And I'll tell you a funny story. When I walked into this kitchen or this house for the first time, and I struggled with breakfast here. I really do, because I don't eat cereal. I hate kind of like one croissant is okay for like one day. It's like, oh, dipping in coffee, it's so wonderful. And then second day, please don't give me croissant. Like, where's the noodles? Where's the rice? You know, I come from Malaysia. So, and then they don't have anything here. So it's toast, cereal, oatmeal, and that's kind of about it. I mean, if you really kind of pushing the boat out, it's like English breakfast. But have you had a full English breakfast before? After you had once, you're like, the second day, you just really don't want to have it anymore. It's really heavy. It's amazing, but you don't want to have it anymore. So one day, morning, I crept down the stairs and I thought, oh my God, what can I cook that are like noodles and stuff like that? And I thought, there is some spaghetti here. There's some bacon and there's some tomatoes. So I crept down at 7 o'clock and I thought nobody is watching. So I crept down into the kitchen and started frying spaghetti, you know, with bacon and stuff like that. Andrew's parents came down. God, what is this crazy girl doing? Cooking pasta at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just remember like being caught in the act of like frying this pasta. And they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like really craving some noodles and that's what I did. I mean, and they don't understand it until they went to Malaysia and had like noodles and rice and the variety of savory breakfast that we had. Then now they understand like, oh, Ping can't have cereal. You know, worst come to worst, we have to have instant noodles in the cupboard for her because that's kind of like the culture that I grew up with, and I don't think this ever leaves me. Or leaves, I would dare say, every kind of Malaysian or people that has moved from another country that is of Southeast Asia will feel the same as me.
Yeah, definitely.
I really struggle with breakfast here. I still do. I've been here for 23 years. And I still struggle with breakfast here.
Wow. So breakfast has always been like the cornerstone of your memories of your childhood and kway teow teng. Rice noodles with nasi lemak, which is coconut rice. And
all that, like martabak, roti canai, you know, char kway teow, wonton noodles, you know. And normally I'll have a few. Like I'll order a wonton noodles and I was like, I'll have some char kway teow, please. And then I'll have some of these. I'll have some of these. My husband always go, why do you always go so crazy when you go back to Malaysia on breakfast? I was like, I want to have a bit of everything. Like it's like a buffet, right? So I want to have a bit of everything. Because char kway teow gives up different vibes than slurping wonton noodles, you know. And then I'll want to have some roti canai to dip while waiting for my wonton noodles to.
That is very Malaysian, food on top of food. But like to give this context, it's also a very cultural thing for Southeast Asian communities, especially for Malaysia and Singapore, to have hawker centers. So the way we do food, it is literally a buffet. So you go into like this shop, which usually is not air conditioned. It's warm in the morning, and you have like in a big kind of restaurant kind of setting, but like little stalls that do different things, owned by different aunties and uncles usually. And usually it's served in an orange color plastic bowl or plate or red.
Or pink. Green now. Or vibrant plastic melamine plates. It's always down to be delicious. And then one thing I always like observe now that when I go back, it's so funny, is you have to watch out for those aunties and uncles who try to steal your channel. Oh, yes. They're like, you go in and you're like, okay, where am I going to sit? Oh, there. And you can see this auntie darting from the corner and it's like, here, I got a seat. And I once I stood up to basically say, oh, we're here, you know. And this auntie literally grabbed the chair, like, off my butt, you know. Just like I stood up and she just...
So this is one thing that I've not said on this podcast, but one thing we always say in Malaysia, right, that eating is a sport for Malaysians. And this is one example, besides just eating, like literally eating, but like grabbing chairs. Well, not that chaotic, okay, like let's mellow it down a little bit. It's not like everyone's grabbing chairs, but it's something that, you know, everyone goes up for breakfast. It's very crowded. You try your best to get a seat, and that's how we do things. And just so that you're not surprised when you come to Malaysia, but we are civilized. We are
very civilized. But the one thing when it comes to food, you know, it turns us into these kind of like, eating and planning to eat what to eat next is an Olympic sport, Malaysians will always take gold.
I feel that.
Always take gold, I think. And I think there is this saying is very, very true when it comes to like, kind of kopitiam and going to get a chair or get something. You snooze, you lose. You need to be like bright-eyed, bushy-tail, like, okay.
I'm ready.
Let's go a beeline into that table. And one thing that it always makes me laugh, which I find myself doing it, like I don't like doing it. It's like you're eating and you're finishing, and then suddenly you have like a group of people just crossing, waiting, like looking at you, like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Like, are you done yet? And then like just behind you, kind of like in Britain, in here, nobody dares to do that. Nobody even dreams of doing that.
I will say though, this usually happens during the peak hours and peak times, usually Sunday mornings, which is most chaotic. But other than that, it's because there's everyone just concentrated in one place and trying to get the best food. And we are very, very particular about our breakfast culture. When it comes to Malaysia, it's an experience. I think it's an experience, and nobody will touch you. You must stand there.
Nobody. But it's just something that I have never actually met anyone who's been to Malaysia who doesn't like the food.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Like, it's an experience, and people still talks about the food. Like, I had a lady that I cooked for, and she's eaten all over the world. She's very privileged. She's eaten the world. And she's turned to me and she said, do you know how to make roti canai? And I was like, yes. I was like, oh, that's my favorite. And this woman is like, really privileged, has eaten in, I'm sure, all the Michelin stars in the world, all the luxury thing. And in her mind, it's roti canai.
Wow.
It's like flaky, delicious bread. My children loves it. Every morning they can have roti canai. It's puffy, it's flaky. If you've never had it before, it's just delicious.
You gotta dip it with either you can go savory or sweet.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people just focus on the dals and whatever not. But my sister has a sweet tooth and she puts condensed milk on it with a little dribble of Milo powder on.
Yes.
But yeah, so like we're very adventurous in Malaysia in terms of mixing flavors, and we're not very like, okay, has to be like that. We're very open to that. But like talking about all this, maybe don't you think so? Like all this like competitiveness in food has helped you in MasterChef.
I think what has helped me is growing up in Malaysia, I don't compromise on good food. I basically can eat, cheap food, expensive food, and any kind of in between. I'm not very picky with food because I grew up in a culture where, you snooze, you lose. You like, my mom's like, you don't eat that, you're gonna go hungry. Here, I find a lot of children, so I don't want to eat that. I don't like that. I don't eat it. And I'm like, in my house, you will starve.
Yeah.
Sorry. But, they say, oh, Ping, how do you get your children to eat so many varieties of food? It's like, they don't eat it, they starve. Like, I'm not making you two different types and things like that. Okay, bar the people who has like allergies and intolerances, I understand that. It's really hard to manage.
It is biological, yeah.
Yeah. But for me, if you can, children are what you teach them to eat from young.
Agreed.
So if they are picky and things like that, it's up to you as a parent to go, this is it. Yeah. I'm afraid. If you don't want it, you're going to go hungry. I mean, my daughter didn't want to eat broccoli when she was 2, I think. Okay. So I put broccoli on her plate every day. Every day, you eat the broccoli. Every day. And by like now broccoli is one of her favorites. Yeah. And they eat salads, they eat like, it's just because I grew up in a culture where, we don't compromise on good food. We have a variety of it, which means it gives me loads of ideas of like mixing things together. We are multicultural. And when people talk about multicultural, it's not just like what we have in Malaysia. We do a lot of cross-cultural flavors and mix. Thailand, Indonesia is so around us, and now loads of things have been mixed with Japanese or things like that. We we love going to Pasar Malam and seeing
the night market,
the night markets and different kind of cuisines that you have there. You know, the viral like Korean, you know, kind of noodles with omelette, and I just love how creative they are with things. And you get like the basic. I say basic. It's not basic. Basic for us as Malaysians is the, you know, our cross-cultural mamak, our nyonya, our, you know, kind of like, and then the Malay food, the Chinese food, the Cantonese food, the kind of like the cross-region food that all fuse together, and the teochew and all that. Those are like the basic. And then you get like the creativeness that is actually taken from different countries. I mean, our food scene is vast.
Yes, and very vibrant and always changing, and which we will talk about in just a few moments when we talk about fusion and authenticity and all. But before that, let's go back to Ping Coombes, that little girl who grew up in Ipoh. Paint us a picture of that little girl who grew up in Ipoh. What were the flavors? What were the smells in the kitchen? Do you grow up with a mom cooks, or was it the grandmother? Or tell me that story.
I grew up in a household where my dad is the only son, so we have our Hakka grandmother.
Oh, you Hakka too?
Yeah.
Okay, ngayon Hakka niya.
And I used to be able to speak fluent Hakka, but I kind of lost it along the way.
No, that's the only line I can say. Okay, by the way. Just in case people listening and they come out to me on the street and go like, I'm like,
I can understand though. I can understand my neighbor still speaks it when I get home. So I grew up with a Hakka grandmother and an incredibly good cook of mother. So, and my grandmother and mother does all the cooking at home.
Right.
So I distinctly remember, I always like describe this, like where we grew up in a small house and in Ipoh, and my mother would get up in the morning and the first thing she does is she put the broth on. So tong, we call it tong, broth, soup, what do you call it? But it's literally making a broth that is from meat. So it could be chicken, it could be pork, it could be, you know, mostly in our households, chicken or pork as a base. And then, you know, she put like different flavoring, and she will have this charcoal hob, which she likes. Yeah. And then everything will be cooked very, very slowly. So she'll put that first thing. And when I'm waking up, I could smell the and I could also hear the chopping, because she will be preparing things for dinner that night or for lunch, because we normally eat at home, and in school we either have morning school or afternoon school. So my mother will prepare some things before she goes to work, and the broth will go on and on a slow cook until the evening when we actually have it on the charcoal. So every day that's like her routine. So growing up, it's like, so for me, that's very normal. But I understand up until I think I was a teenager, I think we were having dinner and my brother's friends came into the kitchen and his eyes was like, oh my gosh, you got so many dishes and things like that. And I just thought that it was just normal.
Yeah.
But it's not normal in household where everything's freshly made. My mom will make it before she goes to work. So for us, we have the Hakka. You know, during Chinese New Year, my grandmother would hang this wind-dried pork, marinate them, hang them, mix prawn crackers from scratch, ferment her own rice wine. Now this, I thought that was normal. Not until that I talked about it later in life, that it's not normal. This is actually quite something to be able to have the skills and also the patience. You know, have you ever seen how a prawn cracker is being made?
No, actually. I was going to say that like rice wine, I do make my own rice wine.
Yeah.
I do like to do everything from scratch, but crackers is something very culturally also. Generally, like you said, most people will just buy it.
Yeah.
Either from the fishmonger. I think the best is always to buy it from the fishmongers because they dry it themselves. And so you don't get too much flour in the prawn crackers. But tell us, how is prawn crackers made?
So she will buy prawns, raw prawns. She will peel all of them by hand. My mother helps her. Every Chinese New Year, it will be months ahead that this preparation starts. And then she will chop it by hand. No blitzy, you know.
No blitzy.
No blitzy. It's chop it by hand. And then she would season it. And then she will just season it and do it in flour. And then she will just roll it, tapioca starch. And then she will just roll it into sausage. And then she steam it. So as she still steam it, the prawn, it's almost like a prawn sausage then.
Right.
Then it's solidified and it's quite thick and chewy. And then she cuts it by hand in her cleaver into even sliced pieces. Then she dries it.
No mandolin, no nothing.
No mandolin.
It's all like
No
cleaver.
mandolin.
And cleavers, if you know, cleavers are actually quite thick, you know.
Yeah, I hate using it. It's
challenging. Yeah.
I have really like weak wrist, and it's like kind of like, oh no. So then she dries it. So during like 2 months beforehand, our house outside is like pork lining up, drying in the sun, and we have plenty of sun in Malaysia, so it works out really well. And prawn crackers, and then on top of that, she will also have this shredded yam that nobody actually has it even in Malaysia, but in our household we shred this yam. We then put it in sugar and deep fry, and then with sugar and sesame and coriander. So it's kind of like a chip, but yam chips, but it's Hakka. So, and I speak to a lot of Hakka. They don't do it at home, but we will have like a frying station, my mom and grandmother, and we'll be shredding this yam down into little strips, deep fry them. Put it with flour, deep fry them, and then with sugar and sesame and coriander. It's amazing.
Wow.
It's called wu si. Wu si is like yam chips. Si is like things like.
And this is yam, like taro, like the one
it's taro.
we use to make yam.
Yeah, the big one with
yam rice.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, I grew up in a household like this. So for me, food has always been really important. And we joke about, like, you sit down in Malaysia, you're like eating it, and you're like, what are we having for dinner or what are we having tomorrow? It's like you plan 2 or 3 meals beforehand. And
while you're eating, you plan also.
Of course, and I do the same thing here. And for me, that's just very normal for me. So when I came over here, obviously it's a struggle, but like every other Malaysian, right? Because it's so widely available, what you're having, your roti canai, your char kway teow, your satay, your this laksa and kari mee and don't know what. It's so readily available around the corner from you. You don't think very much of it. So you're very much like when I started cooking, I want to cook the foreign stuff. I want to cook pasta. I want to cook like, kind of roast or things like that I see on TV. That is like, because in your mind, like when growing up, our foreign food is McDonald's.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. It's like, that's kind of like we call English food, right? You still call them English food. You go to a kopitiam, it's Western food. It's like, what's Western food? It's like ham and some sausages and beans. Like, yeah, that's very Western. But that's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Like spaghetti, I remember my mom trying to recreate spaghetti using ketchup. And she's never had a spaghetti before, That kind of thing. She always tried to make other things. She's a cook, so she wanted to experiment things. But until you try a proper one, you just kind of make it up. I still do, I still do make up recipes that I never tried before, but I try to like the flavor profile by reading it or watching it online or whatever it is and make something out of it. So my mom was like that without the internet then, obviously. But so I grew up, with that sort of experimentation, like classic and things like that. But not until I moved to this country. It's like, actually, the first few years I moved here, I didn't cook Malaysian at all. I wanted to experience like, there are cheeses and there are like things like that. I want to cook pasta and other meals that are not Malaysian. And I think about like 4 or 5 years into it, I started to really crave it. I'm like, look, I live in the middle of nowhere. I was studying in Oxford and then moved to Bath. And then here's like in the middle of nowhere. It took me a while to go to like Chinatown and things like that. But Chinatown's in London. So if I want a nasi lemak or whatever it is, I can't readily have it. So I have to learn to make it.
Yeah.
The first time I made a sambal ikan bilis, it was so spicy. It blew my mind off. Like, it was like, oh my God, it's inedible.
Yeah.
But slowly and surely, I start to experiment with it. And now, I'll be able to make it with my eyes closed.
Yeah. And that was one of the dishes that won you the title, right?
Yes. That's my main course of my final, because nasi lemak has always been the dish, the national dish, but also I think it's really what kind of represents Malaysia, really. You can have the basic nasi lemak, it's still delicious. I mean, it's coconut rice, if you don't know what nasi lemak is. Coconut rice, fried anchovies, peanuts, and this sambal, which is what I describe as a savory, spicy relish that brings everything together. Yeah. And you can have an egg if you wanted to, always like a boiled egg, but I like it with fry, and cucumber. And you think all those separate ingredients are very easy to come by, to put together. It's that sambal that really brings everything together. And it's like, in European culture, there must be a sauce with it, There isn't really a sauce.
Yeah.
Your sambal is what brings it together. So you make sure you mix it in and stuff. So for me, and you get different kind of, when you mix all these different components together, it becomes an explosion of a dish, of texture, of flavors, of everything that a dish should be, it kind of like create explosion in your mouth.
Actually, growing up, we always ate nasi lemak. We didn't know about it. And then like when I went to the world of the culinary world, then I realized, okay, so there's the spiciness and sourness from the sambal. And then there's the crunchiness and the savoriness from the peanuts. And then there's like, we didn't know that every single component of the nasi lemak actually had a purpose. So for example, even the timun, which is a cucumber, right? It's crunchy and fresh. So it refreshes your palate.
For the next one.
Yeah. So I think we downplay our food so much sometimes.
Oh, so much so.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel very privileged whenever I go back to Malaysia. This is in our doorstep. And yet we favor foreign foods. Because I think we're not the only one. If you grew up with good food, you always like wanted to try something else, I guess. Not until you move away that you find actually you have a deeper appreciation of the food and a deeper appreciation of this hawker aunties and uncles that bends over, that makes that bowl of laksa. They only do one thing and they do one thing very well.
Yeah.
The laksa, the kaisi sahofan. I'm from Ipoh and my favorite noodles is kaisi sahofan. I try to make it. And if you trying to make a bowl of kaisi sahofan before, you will know the hard work in making your bowl of soup, your noodles, your garnish, everything. It takes like 2 whole days for me to actually do it. And that's only with shop-bought noodles. And the broth and everything else and the ingredients to go with it. So for me, I think when I look at the uncles, aunties in the hawker store, I salute you because it's not easy. And people say that, why should Asian food be cheap? Have you made a bowl of laksa before? You're quite happy in this country to pay £15 for a pizza, which is essentially, a great pizza is incredible. Don't get me wrong. But it's bread, it's cheese, and it's tomatoes. It's basic margarita. But someone would be willing to pay a £15 because it's been done with craft. You do the bread really nicely. You cook it in the oven.
Yeah.
But they are reluctant to pay £15 for a bowl of laksa. But if you look at how you make a bowl of laksa, it's got so much more work.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason why we want to do this podcast also, to shed some light and to share with people the intricacies behind our food. Because I think it's nothing more than, like a lot of things in the world, it's all branding. It's all branding, it's all knowledge. And I think till we help people understand that $15 threshold, we'll never meet it. And that perception of Asian food will never change. It is starting to change, I feel.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what we're going to talk about now is number one. So you're talking about the kaisi hor fun, right? Which for me, all Ipoh food, especially like the chicken rice, right? I feel that sometimes you can recreate in other places, but for whatever reason, even in Malaysia as well, like for example, the bean sprouts.
Oh, let's talk about the bean sprout.
It's so important. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like the beautiful people from Ipoh. It's the water. I don't know what it is. It's like the bean sprouts. It's like fat and crunchy. And so like if you try to recreate even Kuala Lumpur, I've never found bean sprouts that good. And why?
So my friend's grandfather actually owns a bean sprouts farm.
Okay.
So I went last year. Her grandfather actually dig out like a whole kind of channel for the water of the spring in the mountain that goes straight into the water. The water that actually it is, I was told that it's rich in kind of like limestone. We have limestone caves and limestone mountains in Perak. So all the water that's gathered, these minerals get like filtered through this into their the farm, and they water them like 7 times a day, those bean sprouts, and they harvest them just at the time, and they are like short and fat and dumpy and delicious and crunchy, and it uses a lot of water, it uses a lot of manpower because they still water them by hand.
Oh wow.
So they have like these tubs of like bean sprouts because obviously they don't take long to grow and they don't take long to harvest. So someone has to actually water them 4 or 5 times. I think it was like 5 times at different intervals. Every 3 hours or every 4 hours, it needs to be watered. And they just like hose them down with like loads of water. And then I see them, it's like someone has to be there all the time. So the water, the minerals, and nobody can ever replicate the bean sprout anywhere else.
So like, you know, like the French, they always talk about food and the terroir and all. And I think that Asian food culture needs this as well. People keep thinking of food culture as our char kway teow or our nasi lemak or whatever that. But behind us, the farmers and the way we farm is actually part of our food culture that we are not recognizing. I don't think we're recognizing effectively. But like what you just told us, it's so important for us to remember this because these families, and usually it's family businesses.
Yeah, it's family business.
Passed on from generation to generation. And a side note is like bean sprouts is always, I think any Malaysian who grew up in the Malaysian education system will always remember the science experiment of growing it from
mung beans.
Yeah, the mung beans, right? Yeah. So like, but this is a different art altogether, and like to understand that the water comes from the spring and it's very particular to Perak, tourism of Perak. If you want to sponsor us, please sponsor us.
I've been trying for years.
Yeah, we've been trying for years. I'm trying to help this girl pitch it to you. So like, come on, girl. This girl comes from Ipoh.
We don't talk too much about like where I always like say to my friends, right? We have like Champagne region having like, you know, the DOC on Parmigiana, on Champagne, and it's like because it comes from the region. I think Ipoh bean sprout should have its own DOC.
I agree.
Like I think it should actually comes from like this doesn't actually just come from Malaysia. This comes of a particular region, particular place in Perak, in Ipoh that we are famous for. Why aren't more people talking about that?
We need to do that. I think that is a good proposition. And like in France, we call it, I always go back to France because number one, I'm a cordon bleu chef, I'm a cordon bleu graduate, and like, you know, I lived in France. But one thing they do very well is AOC, Appellation Origine Contrôlée.
Yeah.
It's literally governed by rules and policies and the government to make sure that, for example, champagne, which is sparkling wine that comes from the region of Champagne, can only be called champagne.
Yes.
Right? Anywhere else you cannot call it champagne, it's sparkling wine. Same like what you are proposing, which I feel is true because there's bean sprouts from Ipoh itself, from Perak itself, only tastes like that and only is produced like that because of the terroir.
Yeah.
Right? Because of the way the farmers farm it, the way it's everything that needs to be preserved and controlled.
I mean, they don't even produce enough to actually ship it. They won't be able to ship it. It doesn't stay fresh enough to go to another state, for example. And I've been told sometimes in KL you can find the Ipoh bean sprouts, but to be honest, you need to come to Ipoh to taste it. I went to a fashion event. I cooked for a fashion event in this. And he's Malaysian, actually. Yeah. He hosts this event, and I was catering for it. Yeah. And I did that. And I met this Japanese guy, a fashion model. And he said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "Oh, I'm from Ipoh." I said, "The bean sprouts," he goes. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you know." Yeah. I was like, "You know." It's the things like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it enough. Like, why aren't we talking about it enough? I know I'm from Ipoh and I'm very biased. You know, we have our, bean curd. We have our kaisi salva. We have our hor fun. Have you tried the soft, delicious hor fun? Again, the water and things like that. Although now I feel like Ipoh is actually overcrowded with tourists, I have to say. But Ipoh has always been the hidden gem. I always say, tourists that actually say, "Oh, where should I want to go to Penang, I want to go to Langkawi. You know, Penang's amazing for street food." Yes, it is. But for tourists from other places, they always go to Penang. But for people who knows within like Malaysia or Singapore or whatever, they always come to Ipoh. Because Ipoh is where you will find that amazing food. And in such small concentration as well. So there's a trail that you do, like you go to this place that has yong tofu, you know, the stuffed tofu with a vegetable with the fish paste or sometimes pork, but usually and with the different noodles. It's called Under a Big Tree. This Singaporean chef texted me and said, what I'm going to Ipoh, what should I eat? I gave her a list, and the Big Tree is one of them. And she texted me one day. I was like at an event. She texted me. She went, "Ping, disaster. Say lo," she said. I was like, "Why? What?"
Did we just run out of time? What was that disaster?
Join us next week at the same time as Ping dives deeper, sharing her unfiltered thoughts on authenticity and her wild, passionate love for food. A love that sometimes can be misunderstood. Till then, terima kasih and thank you for joining us on yet another episode of The Hungry Immigrant. It's been a delightful feast of stories and flavors that remind us just how much food brings us together. Now don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you'll never miss an episode. And if you loved today's culinary journey, leave us a review and share the episode with your friends and family. Your support helps keep our traditions alive and our tables more diverse. Do follow us on Instagram at Hungry Immigrant and my personal account Abang Brian for behind-the-scenes looks and extra tidbits from each episode. We love to see how food inspires you, so do tag us in your next food adventure. I'm Abang Brian, reminding you to savor every bite and cherish every moment at the table. Until next time, keep your plates adventurous and your hearts open.